Let's face it, our world is currently inundated with calls to add AI into our experiences. A lot of this is looking at things that are more surface level, but what I'm hoping to go through in this talk is helping you build a team that can help create more of a future and define something that's a little bit more than just dropping a prompt box onto a page. For those of you who have been in the design business for a while, you might be listening to the advice being given and what's being done and thinking it all sounds pretty familiar. I tend to agree with you. In the past, UX designers had to work closely with engineers and other professionals who were experts in the medium we were designing for. At the dawn of the internet, many designers learned HTML or worked closely with developers to experiment and learn what was possible with a medium, as print began a slow march to extinction. We then saw similar upheaval in our profession when the iPhone and other smartphones first came out. We were all clueless about how to design for those experiences. While smartphones weren't as disruptive to our professions as the internet, it can provide a more recent model for those worried about the future of design. With the dawn of AI, we're seeing another disruption to our field that could ultimately be as disruptive to interaction design in the long run as the internet was to print. But we've gotten better at pivoting with a wider set of adaptation techniques. We're still trying to figure out how to make the most out of it as part of what makes this such an exciting time to be in design. I know it's scary, but after you get past the fear, then it becomes fun. This time around, instead of focusing on a specific visual interface or how to handle different gestures, we need to think more about what's going on behind the scenes. Think about service design. And that means working not just with engineers, but also with data scientists or machine learning engineers and the raw data itself. Okay, so I guess we all know about what hallucinations are in Gen AI, right? This talk will cover more than just designing Gen AI, but I'm going to focus on that a bit more since it's where a lot of oxygen in the AI conversation go these days, and hallucination gets a really bad rep. So for those of you who didn't go to my workshop on Wednesday, hallucinations aren't the computer just making up random shit. It's actually the algorithm taking a less likely path of connection. It's a feature of Gen AI algorithms which use more of a network connection of different probabilistic weights across different paths. It's also the fact that a lot of Gen AI is powered by GPUs, and GPUs are not mass precise the way CPUs are. When the computer gives us something that seems nonsensical, it's just taking a path less traveled. That's great if you're looking for inspiration or an out-of-box idea, but not so great if you're looking for a precise answer. It's important to understand these limitations as we design experiences. As a designer, you have the ability to control for the level of hallucinations that your end user may experience. By working with the data scientists or engineers, you can manipulate the randomness that the algorithm is choosing to accept as it makes the choices within the network of options available to it. Now, like service designers, we're designing not just the front end, but the back end as well. This may even include working with the team to identify what models might need to be mixed together to deliver the intended experience rather than relying only on an LLM. It's this mixing of models that will ultimately help us reach the differentiation and personalization that will help our organizations compete when everyone else is using the same AI models. There are only about 4 major players right now. Of course, as a designer, you also have the ability to make informed choices on the front end that can help guide the end consumer to the inputs that will more likely have the results that they're expecting. On the back end, this could be defining context that you feed the model. This is giving it the role you're asking it to play before giving it the task. Often the people you design for will assume this has been fed to the model and won't provide it with the same context they would as that exact same model that your organization is using on their personal account. So they wonder why they get a worse result in your experience than when using ChatGPT. It's because a lot of times the engineers and product managers don't think to feed it the context. This is something you as a designer can help with. One potential solution that's often underutilized because of its simplicity is also surfacing some of the limitations of what the AI can do. A lot of this challenge comes from your marketing teams wanting to puff up AI's capabilities. At present, generated content at this point is unlikely to be 100% perfect, or even really 60% perfect. You need to keep that human in the loop to review, verify, and edit. Otherwise, you set them up for disappointment. As designers, we don't want to disappoint the people that we're designing for. And instead of using the term create, we often want to use the term draft to really emphasize that the human is part of that experience. As a bonus, this expectation setting can help people actually adopt the AI solutions because now they're aware that they're not giving power over to the AI. They're part of that process of editing and refining and launching it. If you're like my team and designing tools for business users versus consumers, then you often have the issue that the customer, the buyer, is excited about the AI features, but the end user is often not, and they're using shadow AI instead. In those cases, we found that proactively surfacing AI-generated content and reducing AI branding has significant improvements in terms of adoption and satisfaction in the experience. It shows that we know what they're trying to do on our platform, surfacing it proactively, but we still keep them in control over determining if the action is right for them at that time and refining that overall content. And again, by not surfacing it to AI, then they're not likely to think that we're trying to take their jobs from them. It's important to keep that human in the loop because they have the context necessary to determine the next step, and that context is almost continuously evolving. The human is able to adjust and adapt while our AI systems might be referencing context it was given 3 days ago. That's no longer relevant. The world changes quickly. For UX historians, this is actually going back to an idea from the 80s, Lucy Suchman's situated action theory. In some of the previous waves of AI, this was required reading by designers in the field. Now, though, it seems to be largely forgotten. Context is ultimately king, or queen, depending. One part of our role as designers, though, that's been timeless, is when we aren't working on commoditized experiences like checkout, where the problems and solutions are often well known, is making sure we understand what problems AI is trying to solve. Right now, there's a lot of drive to just throw AI into a system. And a lot of the hard challenges within AI design right now are about aligning the use cases with the capabilities and the expectations of what people believe it can or should do. If there's too much of a gap between those two places, then we either need to target a set of users who are okay with those limitations, create design interventions to help guide people, invest more heavily in improving the algorithms if we're building them ourselves, which oftentimes we're not fully, or wait to introduce the experience until it can deliver on expectations. That's where it's important for us as designers to explore different patterns within the context of what we're trying to solve for. Although we'll probably get it wrong the first couple of times we work within this space, just like we got a lot of patterns wrong when we were working within mobile design for the first time. There were a lot of really bad initial mobile applications. We figured it out eventually. In the recent past, design was often ahead of AI capabilities, but at present, we are playing catch-up. With too many of us taking a lazy approach of just slapping a prompt box on the page without providing the context to make it happen. This was recently actually called out by Microsoft's chief product officer in the latest episode of Lenny's podcast. She also worked on Google Now 0 to 1. At that point, the design was pretty far ahead of model capabilities, but now it's often the opposite. In fact, like when we got a new head of AI engineering, he was actually very happy with what we've been doing because we've been trying to work ahead of where the models are. If you plan, you're designing what the future could be like in 1 year as opposed to what the current model capabilities are, then your designs will be a lot more likely to be capable of adjusting. So you have to take a very optimistic approach to your AI design. And this is something a lot of designers, I think, right now are struggling with because there's a lot of pessimism, there's a lot of things that just isn't capable of. So one of the most challenging things in AI right now, almost every designer I know has been generally allergic to math, and even more so statistics. And to be fair, I'm married to a PhD in economics. She's got her degree from the University of Chicago, who also hates statistics, even though it's a big part of her job. And also, when I fed all of this to Google Gemini, the 2.5 model, and told it to review the content, It's like, this is great, designers do need to learn enough about design, but at the same time, you're maybe going too technical, especially for my workshop content. But it's better to go over these details in a safe environment and allow people to potentially fail or struggle with it with a fellow designer than it is to never be willing to go broach those conversations with your data scientists and with your engineers. And just to emphasize, you don't need to be an expert in these topics or even have all of the language memorized, but it is helpful to at least be aware of the concepts so you can insert yourself appropriately in key decisions that ultimately impact the experience, even though it's back-end. A quick pop quiz. Can anyone tell me the basic formula for linear regression who wasn't in the workshop? It's something that you may have learned in middle school. Y equals mx plus b, that's correct. Our content friend had it. So now here's the cool part. You actually do pretty well in most basic machine learning with just that basic formula. Like almost 80+% of predictive models just use a linear regression. They're just simple rules, but sometimes they can actually outperform a lot of more complex machine learning algorithms. So if you know this stuff and can apply it, you'll have a leg up on the competition and be able to work better with your team to create awesome experiences for your customers, especially if you can actually take a raw data set and understand it, and understand if you can use this to predict an outcome. As a leader of a design team, you may not always have the data literacy to guide your team to develop these experiences. Right now, that's generally going to be the norm, and that's okay. This is a safe space, and I will fully admit that my own weakness is visual design, and I will thank Google Gemini for designing these slides for me. It's expected that as a leader, you don't know everything, and that's why we hire people smarter than ourselves. And that's where the next section is intended to help you identify some questions you can ask candidates to help you understand if they have enough data literacy that they can have the conversations with the data scientists while you focus on the other things that you have more knowledge and skill to help give that new hire the space to deliver these new AI experiences for your organization. When interviewing candidates, I'm curious about their thoughts on a few things. For example, how would they explain linear regression and its role in machine learning? How does design of a Gen A-powered chatbot compare to designing chatbots pre-Gen AI? The pre-Gen AI chatbots were very much branching logic trees that had to be programmed manual. Gen AI, we set the guardrails, we control the guardrails, we give it the RAG models, but we don't generally have to plan every single step. Another topic I bring up is hallucination within AI algorithms. How would they explain it to me and design strategies they might use to either take advantage of hallucinations or minimize it? Since where too many people just default to using an LLM and don't think, is there a better, cheaper, faster model than an LLM for that context? There are some standard questions that data literate individuals typically start with when working with data. So this is why we'll sometimes give them a data set as well. For instance, they might ask about the range, the mean, sometimes the median and mode, and be able to explain the differences between the statistical measures. Or they may want to create a scatter plot or histogram to understand distributions and potential correlations. There's a lot of potentially useful answers that candidates will provide, but what we don't want is someone who just freezes up when seeing a raw data set or only discusses the values in a specific cell. So it's a very small kind of test that I give them. While many designers often don't take statistics courses in college, it's possible to also find candidates already at your company. If you have a mixed method design research team, which is actually my background, it's not uncommon for researchers to have obtained master's degrees or PhDs, and in those programs, they often have taken statistics classes and as part of doing the research, to have learned various design patterns. They might not have considered how they can apply their research knowledge to designing AI interfaces. So as their design leader, you might need to nudge them to explore that as a potential career path. It may not be about finding a data scientist. It may also be about finding a data scientist who can speak design to serve as the chief partner. But at the end of the day, you'll need to find some way to bridge that gap between your data scientists and your designers in order to develop that close partnership so that way the data becomes as much of a medium to this new digital design within AI as oil is to a painter. Because oil and watercolor is very different. You have to know those differences. So you may not necessarily have a head count, or you might have a significant team that you need to train up to learn how to use AI. This is where you can also do some upskilling. Those partners within the data science team, as well as lunch and learns from different people within your company who may have had this exposure or have trained themselves enough in the models, are kind of your key to getting your team to just, again, know the basics, feel comfortable in having those conversations with that back end and front end. Understanding the different biases that might happen when you're talking about cleaning data, where this data is being sourced from, when it's appropriate to use an LLM because you're trying, it's okay to have some level of hallucination, versus when it's really important to use a more traditional model where you have to give it a very precise answer. This is where, in general, you want to create this to be a very safe space for designers. Again, assuming a decent number of you don't really like math, don't really like numbers. I know I had a former colleague from my grad school program who, even though she was a computer science undergrad before that, really hated math. And when we started having conversations about this, she's like, when I hear anybody talk about statistics, I just shut down, like my brain just freezes. And that's problematic. Like, we have to try to make designers feel more comfortable within these conversations, make it clear that they don't need to know all the pieces, but they need to know enough about what's going on so that way they can influence the key decisions that are happening on the back end, so that way the overall experience works out well. Okay. I won't go into these lunch and learn topics in a lot more detail, but here's some things that you might want to cover. And then I can also make these slides available to anyone who wants them. For Gen AI, understanding the general principle, but not the specifics of Bayesian probability can be useful. I know Bayesian, very scary word. But ultimately, it's all based off of weights within a network and the probability based on evidence from the training data. The more evidence we gather, creating a large language model, or LLM, the stronger the weights of that potential probability are going to be. This also applies to things like supervised and unsupervised learning, and why when I asked an earlier version of Gemini to rephrase something to sound more casual, it always started with, hey, because it sees that in a high proportion of communications tagged as casual. This is why, when designing AI experiences, it's not just about interaction points with the model, but also understanding what data is used to train or constrain the models. As my workshop participants learned on Wednesday, this also includes understanding what assumptions were made by the team when they were cleaning the data to identify any potential biases. Given the complexities of designing for AI in the current state, you really need a diverse range of skills to do this well. You can't just hire designers who are really good at statistics. Even if they were abundant, since they're likely only just okay on a big portions of design, like I'm only just okay at visual design, and that's being generous to me, to be honest, except for potentially information architecture. And while you could plug in one of your current designers on the team to make up for those gaps, a lot of designers tend to be weaker on some skills that can help push AI experiences to the next level, specifically motion design and behavioral designers. Let's face it, current AI experiences aren't particularly visual, and a lot of experiences being explored shouldn't index heavily on the layout and reuse of design system components that modern product designers have largely fixated on. Sorry, Brad. We need more of a team of specialists who can push things further. Also, while a lot of this content is often also generated by AI, this is where Tori's approach to ensuring guidelines are set that are then fed to your models can help ensure the consistency. So content designers do remain critical, but they're often already represented within your design team, whereas most design teams lack people who are really behavioral design specialists, service designers, or motion designers. So motion design is an area where I feel that those of us designing AI experiences are really missing the boat. When we talk about AI like Gemini or ChatGPT, they are so advanced that people often attribute them to magic. People who use AI want it to feel seamless and fun, even if it makes a few mistakes. It makes more than a few mistakes, if we're being honest. This is where motion designers come in. They can make the experience feel magical by using their skills to create cool animations and visualizations. They can also help make AI more trustworthy by making it easier to understand what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to dive too deep into this one as much since it's a little bit more of a traditional design skill. But if you're interviewing motion designers, there are a few things you should keep in mind, especially if you're looking for someone to work on AI experiences. You should ask them how they think motion design can build trust and transparency in AI. They should have some sort of opinion. That opinion could be wrong, but they should at least have an opinion, because again, we're still trying to figure everything out. This is being done right now via fairly lengthy views into the models, or quote-unquote thought process, that you'll see from some of the more advanced, like ChatGPT 4.0 and 4.1, as well as with Gemini 2.5. But what more visual ways are there? Because most people aren't going to read those big blocks of text. Are there ways you can potentially use motion in a different way that gets the core ideas across without kind of honestly falsely attributing logic to these AI models? The other thing you should look at is kind of identifying how using motion design can help assist in the task by helping draw people's attention to what is the next step, how can we kind of continue refining this, again, as together as human and AI working hand in hand in a loop versus separately. So we really have a chance to make AI experiences feel more magical and less confusing. So now you have a data-savvy designer, a motion designer on your team. That's a major advantage for creating AI experiences. These days, there's a lot of pushback and mistrust when it comes to AI, especially within the B2B space, as I mentioned. And a lot of people don't understand what it can do or how it can be helpful. That's where your behavioral designers come in. They're experts at helping people understand and use new technologies. They can make design experiences that encourage people to experiment with AI interfaces, play with it more, and even if those individuals are hesitant at first. And with the help of a motion designer, they can make the whole experience really feel like magic. But creating AI prompts can be tricky. People aren't always good at describing what they want, and algorithms can be finicky. A behavioral designer can help think of ways to help people shape their input in order to ensure that the algorithm gives them what they're looking for. So if you're working in a company that isn't an AI-first startup, which most of us probably are, and instead are adding AI into your existing experience, then you'll also need experts in service design, or at least natural system thinkers, and skill at negotiating and bringing others along for the ride. While AI might be a top priority for the company, and you might be able to use the bulldozer card to deliver the intended experience that doesn't relegate AI to a corner, which is another kind of lazy design pattern, just putting a sparkle icon somewhere. You do want to make sure that the designers of those different experiences understand why AI is being integrated more and are given the opportunity to co-create with you. Although I'll fully admit, you may still sometimes need to use that bulldozer card because change is hard and people tend to feel precious about their experience. So often this involves inventing new interaction patterns, but by utilizing the more atomic components like Brad discussed this morning, it still helps the experience feel unified. Ultimately, having the right specialists is key because we're essentially back to where UX design was in the 80s. When we were talking about computers, when interfaces were brand new, 90s for web applications, and the aughts for mobile design. Back in the day, designers didn't have the right tools for the web. Yeah, you could make a web page layout in Photoshop, but it wasn't great for creating interactive experiences or engaging your users. HTML and the web opened up a whole new world of possibilities, JavaScript even more. But designers had to learn to code or work very closely with engineers to make their visions a reality. When apps started appearing on phones, many of them weren't great either, as I mentioned. But they taught us what worked and what didn't when we began to kind of play and experiment with these different tools. We didn't have the tools like Figma or other prototyping tools. So we had to make do with PowerPoint and cartoons of the finger gestures. We're in a similar place right now to a degree. Designing AI experiences isn't just about page layouts. It's more about the service design and the architectural diagrams of the data. It requires a different type of thinking and skills that many designers are still learning to be comfortable with. But we need all kinds of designers with a wide range of skills to push our experiences forward and deliver on the promise of what AI can bring to people's lives. Ultimately, we risk failing to deliver the experiences we are dreaming up without at least some understanding of the data and a comfort working with that data, or at least with the data scientists who can help us. If we don't, we run the risk of technology dictating the experience, which I think is a lot of what we're seeing right now, where, again, it's just a lot of prompt boxes. We've seen this happen before with things like Google Wave, Apple Vision, which hasn't fully failed yet, but close enough, and other technologies that have delivered disappointment when they put technology first instead of people. AI has too much potential to end up only disappointing, at least in my view. But it requires deep human understanding and creativity that designers are best equipped to provide. So for me, Figma is actually one of these old school design tools right now, in terms of as we move into the AI world. It's not really cut out for designing AI experiences, although it still has uses with AI design. But you'll need to augment it by working with tools that can handle data and let you leverage it better, lets you do more things with motion. Figma Make may eventually help bridge the gap when it moves and becomes more evolved. I played with it a bit yesterday. The plethora of vibe coding tools, though, are actually really helping unlock design superpowers. We're able to pull in data, use it in your actual experience, and move from static screens into much more dynamic experiences. Again, AI is a dynamic thing. We have to have dynamic experiences. We can't just have static screens and a static workflow, because there is no static workflow, because, again, you've got probabilistic endpoints. So combining your traditional design tools with these new ones will help you be able to deliver these experiences. So with design right now, we're at a crossroad. But I really do think it's an exciting one. And we've got the skills across the pluralistic design community in order to deliver on these promises. And if we make the right partnerships within our organizations to help kind of craft these more data experiences, we can move away from what's kind of become a commoditized design community into one that's really helping invent this new future again. Honestly, design had rightfully been commoditized between largely solved problems and reusable components. Like, I used to work in e-commerce. It's a very boring place to work right now. Everything that needs to be solved largely has been. But AI brings some excitement back into the field. There are problems that we just don't have solutions for. There are no easy answers. And because we need to embrace some level of specialization again, just to make sure we get to a place that none of us could imagine on our own. We design better when we take in as broad a set of skills and points of view and knowledge as possible. There's an amazing future we can create with AI. To do that, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable and wade neck high into gnarly problems. Thank you.